they would appreciate that. But you would probably appreciate it more. Yeah, so how about you two? What are you guys going to do?
Computer science, or data scientist.
You want to be what?
Computer science or data scientist.
Okay. Well, you know, my brother teaches that stuff. He's been at American River College for about 30 years almost. So when you do get your degree, if I'm still alive, give me a call. But send me an email or a text or something. And I'll put you in touch with him. And maybe he can find you a job or something. You too?
Well, business.
Oh. Well, that's good. So, is there anything else you guys want to talk about before we go home? Yeah, I think.
In your lecture on Siddhartha and nihilism, you talk about how when you live a life filled with pleasure, it becomes void of meaning. And so it made me start to think about my own position. And I was wondering, do you think that's like an issue with, say, like white men in America, the fact that they have a life of like extreme privilege, that it kind of boosts to this, that it causes this sort of meaningless sensation, which causes the like higher suicide numbers amongst white men than like any other group? Or just a general question of why do you think suicide numbers are so much higher for white men than any other group, despite having a higher position of privilege in society?
Those are just way, way, way too many things. Suicide, white men, pleasure. Maybe we can just focus on one or two or three or four. So let's talk about pleasure first. And then we'll talk about suicide. And we'll see where it goes. Is there any other like topics you guys want to like wrestle with before we go to suicide? No suicide. I mean, okay, yeah. No, digging. I'm sorry, why do we have to talk about this? Because you're white privilege and you demand an answer to your questions because they're so important. I'm just joking. Yeah. There is a scene in the book Siddhartha by Hesse. And you don't have to focus on Hesse too much or the book itself, because this is what I think all great thinkers get to a stage where, kind of like what Socrates had mentioned, that despite all of my ramblings as I walk through Athens, I've never really spoken of philosophy. Or as Plato would say, never trust the written word because it's never philosophy. You know, sometimes let's just say I listened to some talk given by Malcolm X, and it's not so much what he says, it's where his ideas come from. How are those ideas generated? Is it because he's black? Is it because he's oppressed? Is it because he's kind and compassionate? Is it because he's reflective? Is there something that I can see or touch or taste or smell that gives me an indication that if I was to have those qualities, I too will talk like Malcolm X, or think like Malcolm X, or act like Malcolm X? And I say this because there is a scene in Hermann Hesse's book, Siddhartha, that he looks at his friend, Siddhartha does, Govinda, and says to him, there's going to come a time where, despite you having been my best friend for many, 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 many years, that you will leave me. And Govinda becomes a little scared because he doesn't want to lose his childhood friendship or friend. And he says, why? He says, because I'm not really interested in meeting the Buddha. I'm not really interested in listening to him anymore. I'm not really interested in reading books anymore. I'm not really interested in meditating or doing any of that stuff. And Govinda doesn't really understand why he's talking all this gibberish until Siddhartha runs into the Buddha himself and says to the Buddha, you know, what you say is true, but I'm not really looking to truth or falsity. Can you explain to me what happened during the moment of your illumination, when the clouds were removed and all of a sudden God or truth or whatever you want to call it, wisdom, showed itself to you? And that was the element that transformed you, you know, inside and out. I want that. Can you express that? Can you put that in words? Can you put that in thoughts, in ideas, in language? And the Buddha doesn't really say much. He kind of looks at Siddhartha and says, these are great questions, but be careful of being too clever, too cunning, because that's what the mind does. And the two of them part, you know, and Siddhartha remains restless. He comes to realize that his quest for wisdom is kind of fruitless, and he goes back into life and finds himself in the bosom or cradle of Kamala, not Harris, even though she's kind of cute. And she teaches him the art of loving, you know. Sometimes I wonder why people ask questions. I know it stems out of curiosity. Hello. Why are you sitting there? You can't sit there. He's from Afghanistan. You can't do that. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. You guys take things far too seriously. در اندرون من خسته دل ندانم چیست که من خموشم او در فغان و در غوغاست. I share this poem with you, and the only image that comes to mind is when my mom was sobbing when her mom got the news that her mom had passed, my grandmother. And it's such an interesting phenomenon that there are these moments in life that you feel so much, but they can only be expressed through either tears or laughter that, I mean, they're both mysterious, really. So I'm trying to think how I can eloquently and intellectually and philosophically explain what pleasure is, how it comes about, what it does to us, how it goes away, the different bodies that it occupies. So, such a fucking waste of time. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know you guys were here. You know, it's kind of like watching porn, and you think that you're all alone, and you turn around and your mom is back behind you. You guys have never done that? Nah, you haven't lived life then. Okay, so bonjour, Sarah. Terry, please control yourself. You're an adult. For those of you who took a philosophy class because you enjoy philosophy or you take it very seriously, I'm sorry to have failed you. So, there's a certain stage in your life where you're only attracted to things that are very appetizing to your body. In other words, they're tactile. On my way home this morning, I was talking to my wife and I said, I'm going to stop by La Farine and get myself a cup of coffee. This morning when I got here about 3:45, I made myself a cup of coffee, realized how bad it was. And then all of a sudden, it made me think about La Farine. The memory. And the memory is there because of an experience. And the experience is there because there was a good amount of pleasure. It was a pleasant thing. And I have been fantasizing about driving to La Farine after class and get myself a cup of coffee and then going home. It touches my taste buds when I drink it. And something about me says, this is beautiful. Or I sit and watch Cristiano Ronaldo or Roger Federer or Mike Tyson, the young version. And these are my physical apparatus, being connected to something physical out there. And I find it pleasurable. So it's kind of a novice or an infantile way to be. In other words, you simply want to live your life through your physical body, and there's nothing wrong with it. There comes a point, I suppose, where you say, I'm so tired of gratifying myself or finding satisfaction in life by finding physical pleasures or pursuing physical things. I want something that is perhaps a bit more emotionally mature. It's great that I can feel and even, have some emotions about drinking coffee, the memories kicking in. But I want to listen perhaps to a conversation. I want to watch a movie that's meaningful. All of a sudden, your priorities change. The value and the meaning and the relevance that coffee would bring about, all of a sudden, they diminish. They dim somehow for some strange reason. And you long, and you go to Barnes & Nobles or perhaps Moe's in Berkeley and you look for a book. And you glimpse at the covers, and some of the covers, they have great titles, and you open the pages and say, wow, that's a great introduction. Let me just buy that book. And not only are you emotionally stimulated, but you're also intellectually curious as well. So there is the physical body that has its own unique set of pleasures. If you've been in a long-term relationship, what happened is, and I'm guessing, and I think it's true if you're a human being, regardless of your race and ethnicity and gender orientation, all that, is that, like anything else in life, when you've been in a long relationship, there comes a point where you just want sex. You're not looking for meaning. You're not really looking for intimacy. You're just looking for sex. It's something that needs to be satisfied. It's purely physical. Okay. There comes a point where you say, I just can't have sex. I don't want to have sex like this anymore. I want it to be meaningful. And I want it to be intimate. And I want some connection, some relatability. And I don't know what that is. how that feels, but I long for that. And all of a sudden you realize you have entered an emotional body. In other words, you have transcended merely having physical pleasures and you want something different. Okay? But there comes a point where you say, I'm tired of being an emotional junkie. And the way emotions work really is that something from the outside must tantalize you, must inspire certain parts of you. Okay? There comes a point where you say, it's great to feel. It's great to go to sleep, have a dream where you're sitting by Jesus Christ and he's telling you a story or giving you a massage. That's great. But there comes a point where you say, you know what, I don't want to just feel things anymore. I want to understand things. And now you have entered your intellectual body. It's like, I'm tired of being angry all the time. I want to understand it. But to understand the anger, you need to understand history. And it's not just your history. It's how some events from the outside have touched you physically, touched you emotionally, touched you psychologically. And then there comes a point where you say to yourself, I don't want physical pleasures, and I don't want emotional pleasures, and I don't want intellectual pleasures, because what are ideas and thoughts? Really, what are words? They're just like this dead thing on a piece of paper. These are just words that oftentimes get misinterpreted. I want to see what lives inside the word. I want to see justice. I just don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about black justice, white justice, brown justice. I don't care about those things. What does the word justice mean? What's in it? What took human beings such a long time to create a word, justice? What sort of pain lives in it? How does it inspire people? Okay. And all of a sudden you realize it's something that words can't describe. And that becomes like your spiritual pleasure. You're looking for something that your senses can't grasp, that your mind can't fathom. It's kind of a really beautiful verse that you'll find in, I think it's called Katha Upanishad maybe, that it makes the tongue speak but can't be spoken by the tongue. It makes the eye see but can't be seen by the eye. It makes the mind think but can't be thought by the mind. You're looking for that, the very essence that makes something work or come to life. So that's the first thing you need to understand about pleasure, that all of us human beings occupy different stages in life. Some people, for some strange reason, they're just purely at a physical level. Some people are looking to be aroused emotionally. Some people are looking to be aroused intellectually, and some people are looking to be aroused spiritually. Okay, and so if you're hanging out with someone like Snoop Dogg who just wants to smoke, okay, and you say, well, I want to get my pleasure by thinking about as to why people smoke. These are two different worlds. The two of you are never going to understand each other. He's going to convince you. You keep going to say to him, this doesn't make any sense to me. I really want to understand. And I want to understand being sober, not being high. I'm not looking for an experience. I really want to understand what's at the very bottom of this stuff. So that's why communities for the most part will never work, because people stand at different stages in life. And they also differ in the pain that they're suffering from. Okay? And because pleasures are different, because pains are different, because discomforts and comforts are different, we are never really able to understand each other, because we are, again, working on different levels. Now, how does pleasure work? They all function the same way. The only really difference is that sex without meaning, sex without loving or liking someone is like a 10-minute project. And then you'll feel empty and hollow 10 minutes later. If you're emotionally connected to someone, sex is going to be a bit more meaningful, and it's going to last, that meaning is going to last for you for maybe about 2 weeks. Okay? I don't know what intellectual sex is. I suppose it's you want to create some intimacy when you read the dialogues of Plato. When you as a white man are sitting and reading the ideas of a black man, let's say James Baldwin, you intellectually want intimacy. You want to understand why he is the way he is. So the only difference between the kind of pleasures that you're pursuing is their shelf life. That's all. You know, one of the nice things about finding pleasure in pursuing someone like Jesus is that you can spend a few lifetimes trying to figure out what a certain story means. So once you're hooked to someone like Jesus, you will keep having this love affair with him for the next few lifetimes. As you reincarnate, you realize, well, that passion hasn't dissipated. As you gain more experience, you add more stuff to the story you thought you understood. Okay. So the deeper the pleasure is, the longer it's going to last, which means that your life is going to be more meaningful and more purposive. Okay? So if you stretch your memory back to the moments where you were in love, okay, it takes you a long time, hopefully gently and softly and respectfully. You get your companion into the bedroom and then you guys are in bed. And for the first maybe 2-3 days, you just order pizza. You don't leave the bed. You don't shower. You don't do anything. You pee in bed. You shit in bed. You know, whatever you do takes place in the bedroom. Okay. Then after a while, you realize, well, that's not working out for you anymore. It doesn't really work that way, but you just say, I want to move around a little bit. Then you say, let's go out and have coffee. Okay. So that's what happens when there's a good amount of intimacy and passion, emotion and respect in a pleasure. Okay, it keeps you hanging on to it for a longer period. Now, the thing about pleasure is that it feels good. Pornography feels good. I don't care about the good and bad of it. It feels good. Drinking, it feels good. Being a bully, it gives you a sense of power. And power is a thing of pleasure. It makes you feel good. So none of us in this class pursue anything if it doesn't feel good. That's what's common in all these different kinds of pleasures. It makes you feel good. The value judgment comes much later and oftentimes imposed by other people. If you go home today, just go into the kitchen. You know, turn on your laptop and watch porn. Your mom is there, your dad is there, grandparents are there, just watch it. And you realize it feels good until you turn around and realize they're looking at you. And they have this frown on their face. You're being judged, you're being condemned. And all of a sudden your pleasure turns into pain. And then ultimately, hopefully, disgust. Not of them, but for yourself. Okay. For anything to work, in other words, for anything to be pursued, there has to be an ounce of attraction. If you're not attracted, there is no pursuit. Ask anyone in this class who's been in a relationship. If you pay attention very, very closely to how it began, attraction. And then you give it some time, you give it some fantasy, you give it some imagination, and all of a sudden the pursuit begins. As long as you're hungry, you will continue to pursue and you will continue to extract pleasure out of that object. But you have to be hungry. And when you're hungry, it means there are these empty spaces inside you that have not yet been completely satisfied. I've had 5 cups of coffee this morning. I'm not hungry for coffee. I mean, I will drink it out of obligation and then run to Kaiser. But nevertheless, I'm not hungry for coffee. If on the other hand, my coffee machine was broke and I didn't have any coffee beans in the office or coffee grounds, then yeah, this would be fine. At the moment you're saturated, This is Matthew. When you're hungry, you're like this. When you're hungry for something, and you have the capacity to absorb whatever comes your way. Okay, this is you being hungry. This is what happens when you have a little bit of pleasure, but you're soaked in it. And if you can see, it's dripping. Now you can ask, well, why is it dripping? Well, because it's saturated. It can no longer hold any pleasure. It can no longer find this particular pleasure satisfying. So it drips it out. People divorce because of that. People break up because of that. Okay? Now, so pleasure ends when there is satisfaction. So when someone says, I'm in love, they're still hungry. Just wait. It doesn't matter if they're going with the Haitian, the French, Persian. Just wait for the disaster to happen, and it will. So are we, what else did he ask?
Well, I was also asking, now with that answer, I understand they're not really that related, but like, why is there this disconnect of white men who are
Oh,
on the
so
social ladder? Why do they end up being the ones who
well, I don't know why white men are sick and diseased. I suppose the better question is, what's wrong with men altogether? I mean, look at Terry, look at Richard, look at me. Suicide. There are cancer patients who come to realize that there is no remedy for them to regain their health, so they starve themselves to death. That's one way of suiciding, which is really good. I mean, you've come to realize you become aware of certain things about yourself, about your condition, about life, and you've come to a place of peace, acceptance, where you're no longer fighting for a life that's perhaps not worth living. And then you have someone like Robin Williams, who's been on the stage for most of his life, comes to realize that he has this incurable disease, his brain is going to turn into mush, and perhaps all he'll have for a short while is the memory of him being great. One of the nice things that was said in a TV show is called Boston Legal with William Shatner, is that he said this is his best friend, in the show, Alan Shore, that if God is going to force you to lose your abilities, He should be kind enough and just enough to make sure you forget that you were once great. If you're going to be sitting on a wheelchair, God should have the decency of removing that memory from your brain that you could walk. If love is going to fade, God or something out there should have the decency of removing that experience from your memory bank. So there is no comparing and contrasting. Because as long as you are sick, but you can remember how you were when you were healthy, that's like another cross you have to carry. Upon carrying this cross called cancer, it's just too much. Okay. And so there is the suicide of, going back to Robin Williams, coming to realize that eventually he'll just be in a veggie state. He says, you know what, I'm just going to end my life. Because I know I can't go back to that life anymore. And this other life that's waiting for me, it's not worth living. There is another kind of suicide which is really done or walked to by the giants of human beings. Socrates. He is given an option. Don't do philosophy and you can live for the next 20 years. Do philosophy and we'll kill you tomorrow. And Socrates says, just kill me today. It's okay. And when you say that, I want to end my life today and I don't want to just, live my life like a beast for the next 20 years, the reason is this, I suppose. He enters the agora, the city life, talking to people with the hope and the dream that if I was to talk to people, they'll understand me. If I was to talk to people, I would be able to express what lives inside me. I would be able to create some intellectual, emotional intimacy, spiritual intimacy with people. I would be seen, I would be invisible, I would be relevant, I would be meaningful. I would also be able to transform their life, change their life, make them feel better about themselves, about life, make them understand perhaps what God is. And after 20, 30 years, he comes to realize that no one understands really. Understanding is not possible, teaching is not possible, learning is not possible. And if this is my main goal in life, and I come to realize that they're all failures, it's just a wrong attempt, I can't go back to my wife because I don't really care for her. I don't want to go back to my kids because what are kids really but waiting to be useless adults, right? And I don't want to pursue money because it doesn't make me happy. And I don't want to do anything. In other words, you kind of look at life, and life is like this huge toy shop. And you say, there is nothing in it that I find pleasurable, and you end your life. One of the best stories of suicide is the story that comes to us from the Gospel of Judas. And I don't know if you talked about this or not, but one of the nice things about this book is, you have to kind of look at all the Gospels to get to the Gospel of Judas, and what you have is a man who at the age of 12 leaves his parents' house in hopes of finding wisdom. He does so. And then he has this illusion about what he has found and who has become. That if I go back into society, talk to my people, especially Jews, they'll listen to me, they'll understand me, and their life will be transformed. No. In the Gospel of Mark, people stone him. They drive him out. So he comes to realize his own people suck, the Jews. He comes to realize it doesn't really matter if you're a Jew, if you're white, black, blue, yellow. People just suck altogether. So he stops talking. He stops telling them stories. In the Gospel of John, you have a man who just does magic tricks. Tell us that you are the Son of God. He says, okay, well, look at this. And all of a sudden there's a donut. No one can do this. Wow, donut, chocolate, glaze, beautiful. And now you begin to have followers, but you have emotional junkies with zero understanding. People who are inspired to do A, B, C, D, but intellectually they're just novices. So they're kind of useless in the long run. And the Gospel of Judas, he comes to realize, he has some okay disciples, but they don't think well. And they do rituals and ceremonies for all the wrong reasons. They worship the wrong gods. And Jesus comes to realize it doesn't really matter. Life just doesn't matter. And he goes to his most faithful of disciples, Judas, and says, listen, I've talked to Mark, Matthew, Luke, Bob, John, Jack, James. They're all useless. Can you just give me to the Romans? I want to die because as long as my soul lives in my body, and as long as I live in my body will have desires. My body will be tempted. That's just how it goes. There was a guy, Plotinus, around 300 years after Plato. He hated eating food. Because remember, you sit and you think. And like, Rosalind, you're right. You're not a body. You're just a mind. And you write, or you sit and you pray. And then at a certain point, your body says you're hungry, and then you eat. Once the food is processed, well, what do you do? Well, you have to go to the bathroom. But what the hell do you do there? Well, you shit. And what happens if you pay very, very close attention to what's happening to you? You've become a shit-making factory. Just a minute ago, you were writing poetry. You were writing a gospel. Now you've been reduced to shit. And if you really want to stay at the level of the mind or the spirit, coming down and experiencing this nonsense is really quite disheartening. So what do you do? And this is what Jesus came to realize. As long as I live in my body will ultimately reduce me to just a mere man. And I don't want that. I'd rather find myself always in the presence of God. And because what happens when you talk to people and you're misunderstood? You're irritated, you're agitated. These are human things. What happens when they disappoint you? Well, you feel betrayed. What happens that you realize that you left your parents, you left your culture, you went somewhere for 18 long years, you figured out a few things about life, you're coming back to share those good news, the gospels to your people. Nobody really cares, they're not interested. And all of a sudden your own quest becomes meaningless, you know. And so at a certain point he says, you know what, I'd just rather die. Because if I die, I'll have no human emotions. If I die, I'll just be in the presence of God. And that's enough for me. That's one way of doing suicide. The only reason why many people don't commit suicide, even though life really is not that worthwhile, is we are governed by hopes and dreams. He has a 2-year-old. He may be a hopeless man, but there is this glimmer of hope, which is, well, I'm going to take my kid to high school, and then I'm going to take him to college. I'm going to find him a place. And then hopefully one day he's going to come home with his girlfriend or boyfriend or somewhere in between, you know. He has plans to go to Costco today. You know, when you don't have fantasies or hopes, well, there is no pursuit. And if there are no pursuits, you're no longer an engaged animal. And if you're disengaged from life, it means in some ways you have divorced life completely. That makes you profoundly depressed. It doesn't matter what your skin color is. You know, the only reason someone who has a lot of money, maybe CEO or a white man, as you would say, and has a lot of money and privilege commits suicide is, you know, for the longest time in our just human cultures, first of all, love was a taboo. You couldn't just go out to Costco, look for someone, fall in love with them in the next 2 weeks. It doesn't work that way. You get married, you go through the hardship of marriage, and 20 years later, you look at your wife and you say, I love you. But this love has 20 years behind it. It has a good amount of fight behind it, a good amount of friction. You've raised kids together, you've done laundry together, you know. And so there's a good amount of history. But it took 20 years. Now, what you do at the age of 17, you fall in love in 2 weeks. 17. Well, there is no higher plateau, there is no zenith that's higher than love. That's the ultimate destination for a human life, love. Once you're up here at the age of 17, there is no higher you can go. So from that point on, your life is going to be quite depressing. You may break, fine, and then you will pursue, hoping to find another mountaintop, and you will get there, but there is no top, no higher than that. So if you're a CEO, what else are you going to do? I mean, look at what happens to the education arena. You're a part-time instructor. Then you become a full-time instructor. Then you become a dean. Then you become a vice president. Then you become a president. Then you become a chancellor of a district. Then you become a chancellor of the entire community colleges in California. Then you say, fuck all that. I want to be a dean at the UC. Then you become a dean at the UC. Then you become a VP at the UC. That's how it is. There's always something more to look for, okay? But when you realize that there is no higher you can go, life can be quite depressing. How many cars can you actually buy? How many houses can you buy? How many places can you travel? I mean, you have to be a complete moron to be dissatisfied all the time. It doesn't work. There comes a point where you just find satisfaction. And then boredom gets in. And then if you happen to have a lot of privilege, you try to distract yourself from boredom. And eventually you get caught. It's something that Jean-Paul Sartre had said so eloquently. You know, boredom is like Yama or death. It just waits for you. Yeah, you know, I told you you're going to die. You don't believe me. I'm going to come after you soon. you know. You keep running away and running away and running away, and death says, that's fine. And eventually you realize, well, there is you and there is death right there, and you're gone. So, is it good to be privileged? Yes. Is it good to be privileged and have fantasies? Yes. Is it good to be privileged and have no fantasies? No, because then your privilege is useless. It's something, you guys have to go? Sometimes, I'm sure many of you in this class have felt this way. Sometimes you have money in your pocket and you're about to buy something or go to Costco like Richard, and you say, I'm so tired of spending money on myself. I just want to give $10 to someone. I want to feel useful to humanity in some shape or form. So. So now let's talk about men and then white men. I'm just kidding. So anyone else? Aaron.
What is the soul?
What? Go to a Sunday sermon at some local useless church. They'll tell you what a soul is. I don't know what a soul is. All right, sorry. The question is just so upsetting. So, now let me, first of all, express a disclaimer. I have no idea what a soul is, but let me tell you what it is not. Right, Rosalind? Thank you. There is this stage that we occupy. It's called the iron stage. And symbolically, it refers to the genitalia. And by that, I mean it's a place where you want your pleasures to be satisfied immediately. You behave like a 2-year-old kid. Every time there's a desire, you have no patience, you don't want to wait for too long, you become very quickly agitated. It's like texting. You want it to be done very, very quickly. Okay. So, and the iron stage has to do with your 5 senses. You just have to be a little cunning, clever to be able to satisfy the sort of pleasures that come from that particular area, okay? Then you come to a place where you graduate from the iron stage and you move up to the bronze. Bronze happens to be the abdomen area, and that's about power. You're a 29-year-old young man. For the longest time, perhaps, I don't know if you're an artist, maybe you were just a little nuts, temperamentally speaking, that you couldn't follow orders, you didn't like authority, you just had to learn the hard way, which is through your own life experiences, like the prodigal son. Okay? But let's say at a certain point in your life you said, I don't want to drink anymore, I don't want to watch porn anymore, I don't want to smoke anymore, I want to make something different out of my life. And now you enter the abdomen. You're more futuristic oriented. You take school a bit more seriously, you take your relationships a bit more seriously, you behave differently towards your parents, towards other people. And you go to school, you start going to school, and you take classes, even classes you don't really like. They don't fit you well. Why? Because for some strange reason, if in the genitalia, the iron stage, all you were really looking for is a pleasure that can satisfy you immediately, going to school, you have to wait for about 4 years for this piece of paper to come into your hands so you can find some happiness, some sense of joy. Okay? And so this becomes the abdomen. And remember, the genitalia, the abdomen, you're still profoundly selfish. It's about you. It's about your desires. It's about your pursuits. It's about your passions. And then you graduate from this. Now, sometimes if you don't graduate the right way, it means that you will get to the abdomen, you will finish school, you'll get a good job, you'll make lots of money, but then you'll go back to the iron or genitalia stage, where with the power that you've accumulated, now you spend it on drugs, on porn, on stupid, ridiculous things that have nothing to do with your future. It still remains profoundly insecure. So it's good to graduate. If you want to break up with someone, graduate, so you don't repeat the same mistakes. And how do you graduate? Understand the reason why you got involved. Understand the reason why pleasure is there, why attraction was there. You know, how you looked at time, how you looked at youth, how you looked at your own energy, your hopes, your dreams, what qualities you were looking for in the other person, what sort of emotions you want the other person to arouse in you. That's how you graduate, okay? Because once you understand that, you're never, ever, ever going to go back. Unless you just go back for a quickie and then quickly exit, okay? Then there comes a point where you graduate from the abdomen. And the only way you can graduate is to be saturated. And the only way you can really, really, really be saturated is when you understand something really, really well. And when you understand something really well, you walk into things with a great amount of detachment. In as much as you want to create history with them, something about you says no more. You can't do that anymore. You just can no longer help alcoholics or go out with alcoholics. You've understood something very profound about people who have addictions. You have no power over them. So it's best to no longer go out with broken people like that. Okay, that's how you graduate. Then there comes the chest area. And this is a place where for the first time you become very responsible with your emotions. In other words, you invest yourself emotionally in people who are ripe and mature and are decent, like your parents. Now, whatever money you've created from the abdomen stage, you spend on your parents. You buy them groceries. You buy them car insurance. Maybe you're married. Maybe you take care of your kids. Maybe you spend your money on a mortgage instead of just paying rent. Okay. Now, at all these three different levels, genitalia, the abdomen, and the chest area, you have your brain. And this brain works at different levels because without relatively a healthy brain, you can't understand how to pursue pleasures. You need your brain to come down and say, okay, where do you go to get weed? Where do you go to get alcohol? Where do you go to graduate from school? What classes do you need to take? How do I make peace with my wife? You sit back, you examine, you observe, you reflect, and you come to some decent conclusion. Right? So these three areas really have to do with your place in life, physical life. Aaron, are you with me? They occupy 99.9% of your brain space. Terry is taking like 5 classes. What, you think he's got time to sit back and say, what does it mean to be black in America? Yeah, maybe for a second. If he was to entertain himself with that thought, he'd fail all of his classes. He would probably dislike all of his instructors. And maybe he would even end his life. The only reason why he doesn't wrestle with big questions is because life is busy. He doesn't have a soul. All he has is my anthro class, my philosophy class, my dance class, my hip-hop class. That's it. Okay? Now, there comes a point, and I don't know how people get there, when they get there, what needs to happen to them, that sometimes there is a shock to your system. The shock comes in this way. There is a guy whose name is Gilgamesh, and this is a story about maybe 5, 10, 15, 20,000 years old. He falls in love. I mean, he's kind of like us, egotistical, hubris, arrogant. And he's tamed by love. He falls in love with someone he can't dominate. And one of the things about falling in love with someone who has power over you is that They become the lion, you become the lamb. They devour you, and there isn't much you can do. And even though Gilgamesh is a king, and Enkidu is like a nobody, despite being a nobody, because Gilgamesh loves more, he becomes the sheep, he becomes the lamb. And because Enkidu loves less, he has power over Gilgamesh. Now, when you fall in love with ridiculous people, their shelf life is about 2 weeks, 3 weeks. If you're lucky, maybe 6 months. If you happen to fall in love with someone like Enkidu, who has the beauty of the gods, who have the strength of the gods, the wisdom of the gods, who's lived in the forest, he knows what innocence is, what it looks like, how it functions. He knows how it feels to live with the animals, to live in open space amongst the trees, and the water. And he also knows what happens to people when they live in the city. And once in a while, only for a breather, they go hiking amongst the woods. Okay. This man has a lot of power, Enkidu does. And so Gilgamesh is not falling in love with an ordinary man. He's has fallen in love with a Gandhi or a Jesus. You can only find one of those people in every generation. One in every generation. Okay? When you fall in love with someone like that, no one in your community can ever come close. And so what happens is that the gods decide that Enkidu must die, and Enkidu does die. Now Gilgamesh sits and says, what am I supposed to do now? This is the only guy I've loved, and this is the only guy I can ever love. Go back to the city life for what? City has nothing to offer me, because life can offer you no gift more valuable, more noble, more decent than love. Not loving Snoop Dogg, not loving weed, not loving the genitalia area, not loving the abdomen, not loving the stuff that comes from your chest. Loving someone because they have this unbounded quality to them. They're a mystery. There is this thing in Buddhism that the Buddha had these qualities. I won't name all of them to you, but one of them happens to be divine ear. The other happens to be divine eye. That you look someone in the eye, and for some strange reason you feel empty all of a sudden. And you're reminded of something about yourself. You can't really put your fingers on. You don't really know what's happening to you. All you know is that you're connected to a mystery within yourself. And that confuses you, frustrates you, attracts you. And sometimes you gravitate towards that person. Sometimes you're far too frightened, so you run away as fast as you can. Okay? Divine ear, that though you and I can only communicate through language, this guy can actually look at you, listen to you, and hear what you're not saying. And you feel close, and you feel sheltered, and you feel intimate in ways you can't describe. And so what happens, and remember, Gilgamesh is a king. King equals power. Power equals privilege. Privilege and power means you have purchasing power. You can buy anything under the sun. But when you fall in love, all of a sudden the world shrinks. Money has zero value. It doesn't matter whether you live in a kingdom or a tent. The only thing that you want and the only thing you know is love. Without it, you're poor. With it, you're rich. Sometimes what happens to bypass the iron stage, genitalia, the abdomen stage, power area, and the chest stage, the emotional relationship area, is you fall in love with someone who has certain qualities to them. Now, look, Malcolm X doesn't want your body. Malcolm X doesn't want your money. Malcolm X only wants your mind. Why? Because he wants to put justice in it. But you can't know what justice is, and he can't tell it to you. And all of a sudden you realize you've fallen in love with justice that can't be described, that can't be seen. You fall in love with a ghost. And if you look at human history for eons, that's the only thing we've been interested in, justice. Social justice, political justice, personal justice. So sometimes these three areas can be bypassed if you're able to fall in love with someone. Now here's the thing you need to understand about this particular love. The genitalia, the abdomen, and the chest, they create habits. They create stories. They make you who you are. When you fall in love with Malcolm or Gandhi or Jesus, they don't really care about those narratives. They don't care about those stories. They don't care about your addictions or habits. And so what you realize is that you're going this way, they're going this way. You find yourself attracted to someone like Gandhi, right? You want to pursue Gandhi, but in order to pursue Gandhi, you have to abandon, divorce, suicide, the passions of the genitalia, the passions of the abdomen, and the passions of the chest. Now, it has taken you 29 years to be the man that you are, with all the memories and experiences. Do you know how difficult it is to overcome them? Nearly impossible. So if soul, if something intangible, something you can't see or touch or taste or smell or hear, if it's not connected to your physical body in any shape or form, it means that someone needs to walk into your life and get rid of all of your physical appetites, emotional appetites, intellectual appetites, all of your assumptions, everything. Now, do you know what happens when you're attached to your wife and she comes to you and says, I'm leaving you? It's a shock. It's a traumatizing experience. It's going to take you some time to adjust, okay? And once you know that she's not coming back, you're not going to accept it easily. You're going to get depressed. You're going to feel lonely. How do you overcome loneliness? You go to a coffee shop. You read a book. You go to some self-help groups. If you're questing after a soul, there are no workshops. There are no books. There are no YouTube clips. That can change if someone deliberately broke you. If you run into a Socrates, very much like Plato ran into Socrates, Socrates broke him, protected him, nurtured him, and after a while, Plato became the man that he became. Sometimes what happens, going back to Matthew's question, and of course Terry's question, even though he didn't ask, is that you've either been blessed or maybe you're just cursed, where you have the privilege in this life to be saturated by all the passions generated by the iron stage, genitalia stage, where there comes a point where you say, I'm no longer interested in casual sex. I'm looking for meaning. I'm looking for like a bona fide relationship. You have one. That's where the abdomen comes in. Okay? There comes a point where you say to yourself, it's a good relationship, but I want someone with whom I can have a family. Now you've moved into the chest area. Okay? And now you have had the wife, you've had the kids, the house, the car, the job, the money. And now comes the breaking point. And it doesn't happen for all of us. We have hints of it, intimations, that it's not enough. You may even have these dim hints of walking away from the relationship, letting go of the kids, all of it. But there is something about us that kind of forces us against that particular move. So you stay in the relationship. For some, you realize that you've had enough experiences here, genitalia, enough experiences here in the abdomen, enough experiences here in the chest, and for some strange reason, nothing is sitting with you easily and comfortably. And now you begin to be more introverted. You go way into yourself. Your wife slowly, she sees all of this stuff. You're a bit more quiet now. You're slower in your physical movements, not because you're sick or anything. It just takes you time to generate the passion. Okay? You used to watch movies, and now you say, well, if you want, I'm not really interested, but if you want to watch, I'll sit and watch with you. The kids say, well, let's go here and there. I don't really want to, but if you want, fine. And little by little, you're becoming more and more detached from your life, and you're divorcing your life a bit more. And these are like suicide in the sense that you no longer want to go back to the world of pleasure. You no longer want to go back to the world of power. You no longer want to go back to the world of relationships that have meaning and depth. that you're looking for something. You don't really know what you're looking for. All you know is that these three areas are no longer doing anything for you. And that's devastating. Now, in a culture such as this, the American culture, where people are unhappy, dissatisfied, lonely, divided, fragmented, broken, fucked up in 1,001 different ways, the assumption, the illusion that's created for them is if you go to Barnes and Nobles and you're in the self-help aisle, it means you're after your soul. No. You really need to be quite healthy to be able to pursue the spiritual quest. I mean, you really need to be healthy. You can't be on a spiritual quest if you haven't understood the powers of sex, if you haven't understood the powers of money, if you haven't understood the power and the privilege and the comfort given to you by like decent relationships with human beings. Because what you will do with that power is you will exploit other people. And that's profoundly dangerous. If you're an American, born in America, seasoned by American culture, you have no business in traversing the spiritual path. What you should do is finish school, get a job, save some money, find yourself a nice companion, okay? Have some kids. And then if life grants you the privilege of sitting back and observing everything you've done, okay? If you get to that stage, sometimes you look at your life and you say, it's beautiful. Sometimes you get there and you say, it's great, but it's just not enough. And should that not enoughness feeling grow more intense, there will come a point where your family will not be able to reach you. Now, it doesn't mean that you'll divorce, and it doesn't mean that you'll be on a spiritual quest. It just means that your life is not enough, and there isn't much you can do. Are we good? Oh, I'm sorry for that long, wasn't it? Terry?
Are ghosts real?
Ghosts? They're seasonal entities. They come and go. Sometimes they're nothing but the creation of your own imagination. If you happen to have come from a culture or a tradition that believes in such things, then yes, they can appear. If on the other hand, you're part of the scientific revolution that took place around the 17th century, there's a good chance that you're going to approach that question with a good amount of skepticism. Ghosts? No, that's a ridiculous question. If on the other hand, you come from that tradition, you know, what was that movie that recently came out? Coco? La Coco? Coco la Coco? It's a French movie. I will tell you stories, but maybe like in a few years. Anyone else? Olivia? Yeah.
How do you know you deserve anything?
Imagine for a moment that that's Terry. And like your shoelaces, we're going to do some integration. Imagine for a moment that Terry is a very self-aware man. In other words, he believed himself to be entitled to his anger, and his anger gave him the privilege to push people around, to scream at them, and for him to always justify his actions because he would always say, well, my father this, and my culture that, and the white man is this. At a certain stage, he comes to realize, after many tries, that he is indeed a very, very broken man, that everything he touches dies. Then you and Terry meet in this class, and he asks you for a coffee date, and you say yes. You find him somewhat attractive, and you guys talk about this class. After 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks, you realize you have feelings for him. And then he wants to talk to you about some of the contents, the things we talk about in this class, and you stop and say, Terry, I'm beginning to fall in love with you. And he looks at you and says, Olivia, don't do that. Why? I don't deserve it. Why? I will mess you up. I have so many unresolved issues. I will mess you up. I don't deserve the love you want to give me. Let me go somewhere. Let me fix myself. Maybe next reincarnation. I don't deserve it. And the point I'm trying to make is this idea that you don't deserve something can either come to you after many years of introspection, where you come to a certain understanding that there are things that people want to give you, but you don't really deserve. Now, it may also be that it is true you don't really deserve, but you're a human being. Sometimes you just want to lay next to someone. Sometimes you just want to have a conversation, even though you're a savage and you're undigestible and you're crude and you're mean. Once in a while, you're able to tame those negative and violent emotions just to have someone sit next to you, even though you don't really deserve their company. Okay. There are also these very, very, very intense introverts that they just have this intuitive feeling that they don't deserve life, period. They're not good in anything. They're not good for anything. They're just extremely and overwhelmingly confused, and they're just buried under an intense avalanche of emotions. I think I shared with you the story. My sister in Roseville High School had a friend. Her name was Anusha. She wrote this wonderful essay. It was supposed to be her last essay, in fact, her last week at the school, because she had planned her suicide. The English teacher reads her essay and comes to realize, man, this is beautiful. Not even Edgar Allan Poe would be able to write such a thing. So he invites her to her office, and then he and his wife take her out for dinner and then visit her family. And through his help, she gets admitted to Berkeley, UC Berkeley, and then Stanford. She gets her PhD, and now she's teaching English literature. So there are moments where life just offers you a really, really awful hand, where everything about you gets broken and your self-confidence goes down, where you don't find any value or purpose in yourself or life. And then someone intervenes. Is it time? Let's have a few more questions. Terry? For those of you who have to go, go. This is not the Middle East. I'm not holding you hostage. Anyone? Abi? Dig it, where are you going? Sorry to hear that. You take care. It's good to see you. Yeah.
How do you feel like
What you deserve? I think whenever you realize that you've become a good container for something, And I don't know, when everybody works on a different timetable. It also depends on who is giving you what exactly. I don't know if I deserve being given coffee every class meeting, especially because I only drink a sip. And then get rid of the rest. My apologies, Terry. There needs to be a great amount of appreciation for all the things you have. And when you realize that in many ways, the sort of creatures that we are, being in the cradle of forgetfulness all the time, do you really deserve to be healthy? When you don't appreciate it, when you abuse your body, when you abuse your body by smoking, drinking, or being ridiculous around ridiculous people, abusing your intellect. The truth is, many of us don't deserve what we have. You can only deserve what you have when you grow to understand and appreciate what they do for you. I'm a 60-year-old man. Only recently have I come to appreciate my physical body. Only recently do I now stretch a little bit, go out for walks a little bit. And it's not because I value life, it's because I don't want to die a painful death. And every night I go to bed, I say, maybe I just won't wake up and that'll be fine. So, on very close and intense and honest reflection, none of us deserve anything. If on the other hand, there is a purpose and a pursuit that's valuable, and if you're able to understand it really, really well, then you become a good container for those passions to enter into you, because they find you the right vehicle. Imagine you fall in love with the wrong person. It's just the wrong vehicle to fall in love with. Now imagine if you fall in love with the right person. That's the right vehicle to fall in love with. Why? Because they'll say yes to a marriage, they say yes to kids, they say yes to buying a house, to all the awful obligations and responsibilities that a family life brings about. I get emails from students, especially now where we are very close to ending the semester. I look at their grades, they haven't done a single work. Not this class, other classes. And they don't deserve a response from me. I'm not going to go out of my way to give them a response. And they can complain. I don't really care. There was a point where I was okay with being abused. That point is no longer for me. I want to be respected a little bit. If not for my age, certainly for what I've gone through. If not that, just my culture. If not that, fuck, you're a 20-year-old kid, I'm 60. Have some respect. So if you're talking about finding yourself in a place where someone can appreciate you, make sure you have the right stuff. Aristotle had talked about false pride. It's like you suck at playing the piano, but you come to class and you rave about how great of a pianist you are. And then I bring a piano to this class, and you sit, and you can't play. You say, God damn it, for 16 weeks you kept telling us how great you are, but you suck. And then there is her. She doesn't say anything. And then she sits, and she plays. And all of us are just mystified and dazzled. And then she stands up and she tells us 2 hours of what she went through. That's a good pride to have. I think if you go to YouTube, find any celloist, any violinist, any pianist, anyone who's good at anything. Don't look at what they're doing. Don't look at how well they're playing the piano. Just sit back and say, man, I wonder how much time it took for them to become so good. And then you realize you appreciate the sacrifice. So, yeah, anyways. So anything else going on with any of you before we, Matthew? No, anything specific for you?
Boring.
You're boring?
Yeah.
That's not true.
I'll do it.
That's good. The class is going to end in about 3 weeks, I think, if Richard's calculation is right. If you have enjoyed this class, my recommendation would be to exchange numbers with your fellow classmates. Have them over for Thanksgiving. Or at least go to their house once, see where they live, and when they're not home, break in and take what they have. Stay in touch with one another, create some friendships and some common denominators like ideas. They will come handy. Because if you get to Junai's age or Richard's age or Riteri's age and you want to make friendship, life by then will be far too busy. And you'll be way too stressed to create friendships. If you're young and you have a lot of time on your hand, hang out with these crummy people in this classroom. Create some nice stories. Who knows? You may marry one of them, or maybe two, the way this culture is going. Any other questions before we go home and come back again on Thursday? Abi? Go ahead. It's okay. Unless you don't have anything. I can't eat meat, whether it's white or black. I'm hoping for some potatoes. My family's coming over, so they don't even like turkey. They don't even like America. I'm just kidding. It's just nice to be around family. Yeah. But if you guys want, we can come together finals week. We have 2 hours. We're going to meet at 8. You guys can bring a couple of turkeys. I have a big backyard. I wouldn't mind taking them home and having them walk around. Wolf, anything? You sure? You're not sure. Oh, go ahead.
I'm still figuring out format.
Okay. Yeah, Janai.
Last week, you had mentioned something about the Egyptian. And then in death, the heart is gay. And in order to pass over, it has to be light as a feather. So how do you empty yourself?
Can I tell you a story? I mean, it's a great question. Let me just give it to you this way, and when we come back on Thursday, you can ask it again, and we'll do the long version. When I met my teacher, Hussein, I was like 19. I had nothing. I had no relationship. I had no money issues. I had no parent issues. I wasn't filled with book knowledge. I didn't have anything. All I wanted to do in my life was either to play soccer or to play tennis or to sing. That's all I wanted to do, nothing else. There was no trauma inside me. In fact, the word trauma didn't exist for us. Okay? So when I went to India, nobody told me, well, they shipped you to India because your parents didn't love you. So none of those things exist. So on the inside, it was quite like clean. And I was young. And I was confused, like any 18-year-old. So Hussein had a really easy time to, first, I had some attraction towards him, of course, his ideas. And then from that point on, the brainwashing began, where he manipulated, coerced, brainwashed me into liking the things that he enjoyed, which was philosophy, religion, politics, and social issues. And that gravitated me towards just doing that academically, but not wanting to teach. We had another friend whose name was Hussein. He's my mother's cousin. By the time he met Hussein, he was 40. He gambled once in a while. He had a wife, he had kids, he had a house, he had a mortgage, and he had a job. So his brain space was occupied for about, 40, 50%, okay? So he gave Hussein only 50%. There came a point that he grew, his passion, his love for Hussein grew so much that it impacted his relationship with his child and with his wife. He quit his job. And he had ghostly experiences. We'll talk about that perhaps another day, okay? He stopped caring for anything and everything. The self that you and I have, that likes physical stuff, that likes money, that likes like relationships, none of those things existed for Hussein. He would sit in his room and read, I kid you not, for 15, 16 hours a day. And he's a Muslim, at least that's how he labeled himself way back then. He prayed maybe 1,000 times a day. That's how intense he was. And in that sense, you could say that Hussein did his magic on him. He removed a self that pursued immediate gratifications or pleasures that he had to wait for, or relationships that needed work. And you engage in these things because you find them valuable. Okay? But Hussein did a number on him to a point where he found none of those things valuable and interesting. Time passed. He grew older. He got sicker. His wife got sicker. His kid got sicker. And now he sits home. He can't see. He's like half blind. He can't take care of himself. So the point I'm trying to make is, when you say empty of the self, the question is, well, what exactly are we talking about? There is a self that has a great amount of memories. Some memories are negative, and you say, I want to get rid of the self that has been traumatized. Okay? There is also another way where you say, I just want to get rid of everything. Now, that's a different story. If you're talking about a self that always intervenes and destroys everything that you touch, you very much love your kids, you love the man you're with, you love school, but once in a while these memories of the past kick in and destroy everything that you've built. And then kind of like going to therapy, say, listen, in like 5 bedrooms of my interior, 4 of them are really good. 1 is just filled with junk. And every time the door of this room opens, these junks come out and infect all these other rooms. I want to keep these other rooms. I just want to get rid of this one room. If that is your question, it means that you need someone to gain access to that one room filled with junk. Now, for you to give them access, you need to trust them, have faith in them, like them. But there's also going to be these moments where you say, I have opened myself up to other people, and they have taken advantage of the knowledge or information or experience I've given them, and they've come back to bite me with the things I've given them. Okay? So, in the end, it depends what sort of a self are you talking about. Now, you're healthy, so you don't have physical issues. So this self that's bounded to your physical body, forget that. That's fine. There is this emotional self now. Now, there could be parents. It could be problems you got with kids. It could be problems you got with loneliness or depression. That's a different issue. But to fix the emotional issue of emotional self, you need a self that's able to think well. Okay? So before you can tackle the emotional self, you have to refine and you have to rebuild and reinvent the intellectual self, so that self can come down, go to the bedroom of the emotional self, open the door and say, okay, what the hell is wrong with you? So you can sit back, look at things, examine things, process them, understand them, keep the stuff you like, trash the stuff that are poisonous. If you're talking about the spiritual self, the physical, the emotional, the intellectual, they must all go away. The easiest way that I know, find someone you're attracted to, it has to be, it depends what you're looking for to fix really, and then you got to fall in love with them. One of the nice things about falling in love with someone who can get rid of a certain self about you is this. You may be angry, you may be mean, you may be vicious, but the moment you love someone, you will always put your best foot forward. That's what love does for you. It tames you. And if you're in love with the right person, what slowly happens gradually is like this drip drip syndrome, which is little by little, they inject their own thoughts and their own emotions and their own history inside you. And you become less of you and more of them. Now, the more of them you become, the less you're going to like the parts of you that have remained. And then there is a conflict, the love-hate. Sometimes you will gravitate more towards them. Sometimes you will just be repelled and walk away because everything is getting messed up. The easiest and the shortest and the royal road to getting rid of any poison is love. Having another person dominate you in a way that's healthy. I know some of you don't need to leave, so listen, do you want to stay more or do you want to go? I'm going to go to my office. You guys, it's a big space. You guys can come there, make coffee, have some tea. I have a fridge there. It has nothing in it. But have some almonds. And Abi brought some food. So it's good to see all of you. I mean, if you have any more questions, I'm more willing to stick around. If not, we can just leave. It's up to you.
Say part first.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. It's good to see all of you.